So before we begin, I wanted to introduce the CADRE organization and the reason why we sponsor these events. CADRE is the Coalition for Advancing Digital Research and Education here at OSU, and we are a loose organization or community of people who help promote and sponsor digital and data-intensive research and education. And so this year, instead of a conference, which we have historically done on an annual basis, because we were looking at potentially having to do it remotely again, and frankly, I don't know about other folks, but virtual conferences are getting pretty old. So we decided this year we would shake it up a little bit and do things differently. And so we are doing monthly symposia instead with a variety of topics and discussions. So before I leave this slide, just let me mention that, as I said, CADRE is really anybody who wants to get involved. So if this interests you, we would absolutely love to have you participate with us. You can either drop an email to the CADRE-conference email shown there, or you can go to the webpage, the CADRE webpage, the URL's there at the bottom of the slide, and just let us know. And we will include you in our usually about 2 meetings a semester and any events. Speaking of which, I want to mention our March event, which is little something different. This time we are going to try an in-person, and Gary Grider is actually an OSU alum who has spent his career at Los Alamos National Laboratories, and he is actually the leader of the high performance computing division there. So he has a lot of knowledge about data management on a scale that makes my head explode. Sensitive data, particularly relevant right now with regard to, of course, Los Alamos is a nuclear facility. So anyway, I'm looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a very interesting talk, and he is going to present in the OSU Library Browsing Room on Wednesday, March 23rd. I have the registration link here. I'll drop it in the chat before we're done, and please consider signing up for our March presentation, which we look forward to doing in person. It will be recorded for those that can't attend, but we're looking forward to seeing a real life, living, breathing human being. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Rebecca Eastham, who will be the moderator for today's symposium. Rebecca, take it away.
Thank you all for joining us today and your interest in this topic of using data for social and business impact. I'm Rebecca Eastham with the Spear School of Business and joined the faculty recently to be part of the new Spears Center for Social and Business Impact. And we're excited about this new initiative of taking this work that we do with data and with research that we want to, using what we know about business to impact the greater good. And so excited to be a part of this conversation and really interested for you all to hear from our presenters today to see kind of the wide range of research that's being done, the topics that are being done, and how we're kind of doing it in new ways with all this access to data. And so with that, our format today, each of our presenters will spend a little time going over their topic, 15 to 20 minutes. If you do have some questions for them, feel free to put those in the Q&A, and we'll make sure that they have time at the end of their block to address specific questions about their research. And then as we wrap up our conversation today, we're just going to talk in general with our panelists about kind of the big data, where they see the future of it going. Why is this an important topic to us? Those types of things. So that's how we'll spend our time today. If you are a student and you're joining this call as part of a class assignment, if you would please chat your name to me directly, Rebecca Eastham, if you'll go to the chat, do a direct message to me and type your name. We want to make sure that we get that attendance recorded and that we get that into your professor. So again, thank you for joining us today, and we'll go ahead and kick it off. I am delighted to introduce to you Dr. Miriam McGaugh, who is an assistant professor of professional practice in business analytics, and she's been doing some interesting work in the area of human trafficking. So Miriam, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you to the folks in the library and CADRE for setting this all up, and to Rebecca for coordinating our social and business impact symposium. My research specifically on this project deals with sex trafficking and looking at big data. But what I'm going to talk to you guys about today is how we were able to compare a qualitative coding method that we have typically used with text analytics and with text-based data, and some newer methods for text analytics with a computer system. So we're going to talk about that. We have large data amounts that come through on this project. So I'll talk a little bit about what the problem is around human trafficking, how big the problem is, our research consortium that's been working on this for a while, and some data and methods for this particular portion of the project. And then we'll talk about kind of wrapping it all up. If anything doesn't make sense at any point in time, please let me know. We tend to get so ingrained in our research that we forget that not everybody is in our world. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's talk human trafficking. And so what does it look like? This is a little old, but it gets the job done. Let me pull some things over. These numbers are from September of 2017. And if you can imagine, these are not updated often because it's really hard to track human trafficking, period. I mean, it's not like people report this on a daily basis. Actually, they do report it on a daily basis, but it's not consistently reported properly. So in 2017, it was estimated that about 25 million people were stuck in this modern day slavery process. That actually has gone up. The estimate is around 40 million people now. And so it's growing. Unfortunately, it is not going away. It is about $150 billion a year industry. So it's big, big money. And we're not seeing that curb anytime soon. So what does human trafficking really kind of look like? About 64% of the people that are part of modern day slavery are in the forced labor. And think about labor trafficking, restaurant workers, picture here, retail, clothing workers, farmers, people that are just trying to come someplace to get somewhere, to have a better life, but something happens when they get there and somebody is withholding their pay, withholding their documents, and forcing them to work in environments that may not be healthy at all. That is about 51 billion, about a third of the money. However, 2/3 of the money around human trafficking is estimated to be in only 19% of the market, and that's sex trafficking. So it's the high dollar component, but it is smaller numbers. The third component is really underestimated because this is not calculated anywhere, and that is state-enforced, state-based forced labor, and state-imposed forced labor is what they call it. And so if you think about countries that force their citizens to go and be in the army, it's not that they give them choices, you can go this way, or this way, but they are forced, they're taken from their home, they are put into a situation where they are not, they were never intending to be. So the state of Oklahoma and the US pretty much considers human trafficking anything that is brought on by force, fraud, or coercion. And specifically, sex trafficking is force, fraud, or coercion. And if you are under the age of 18, it's sex trafficking no matter what. Or human trafficking no matter what. So if you are being forced into prostitution and you're a 16-year-old, that's automatically sex trafficking. Even if they sit there and say they chose the life, and that is not the case. So let's go on. What does investigations look like? Not near enough, unfortunately. So this is from the Bureau of Justice and Victim Affairs, and they have initiated in this 3-year period, 16 to 18, they initiated 5,800 investigations. By far, most of those were sex trafficking investigations. Unfortunately, not very many of those actually make it to prosecution and actually are prosecuted. That's much, much smaller. But we're looking at about 4,000, just out of those almost 6,000 cases, about 4,000 victims. So some of those victims, they have, they just have never found. They died in the process. It's some of them are repeat victims. It's really a large problem. However, everybody thinks this is an international problem and we import it, and that's not the case. Of these particular victims, 76% of them were US citizens. So it's happening. It is happening everywhere. It's happening in Stillwater, Oklahoma, in Oklahoma City, in Tulsa, in Guyman. It happens all over the place. It doesn't matter where you're at, it is going to happen. So let's move on over to our research consortium for a little bit. OSU and LSU, Louisiana State University, originally got together to work on this project in about 2017. LSU had been working on it for a few years before that. And then University of Alabama joined in to help out on the project. We work with Louisiana State Police and Oklahoma law enforcement, and we are really trying to look at large data sets in a different way to where we can find patterns and behaviors so we can help law enforcement find these trafficking networks. So we look at online ads, we look at Twitter data, we look at other types of websites that are out there. We'll talk a little bit about some of those. And we look for things like this, where we see patterns that normal number recognition won't pick up. So they may have like a number for a 0 spelled out and a character for a 5. And that is really hard for computers, traditional computer algorithms to pick up. So we are working on some ways to find those types of issues. So just like geese have flying patterns, we can find patterns within these large data sets. And really our goal is to identify patterns that are persistent, that have a great intensity. They vary or they are across geographies. They're not just within one area. And they, even if they are in one geography, they have movement of some sort. So there's movement across communities, and that really is very much an indicator, according to our law enforcement partners, of human trafficking or sex trafficking networks. So specifically about our qualitative project, we looked at almost 3 million ads off of a website that was active for a while, called backpage.com. It is no longer active. It was very handy for the traffickers and customers while it was active. It was also extremely handy for law enforcement and researchers because everything was all in one place, and Backpage just let us come look at it. And then the federal government closed it down. So now, instead of just having one web site that we have to look at, we are looking at 20, 25 other websites that we are pulling information from. But from these almost 3 million ads, we were looking at phone numbers and what happens in phone numbers, and how can we use those phone numbers to link ads across locations. So we had a little over 335,000 phone numbers. That is also a lot of information to match up. So we have one problem with sex trafficking data. It doesn't have a target. It doesn't have something that says, yes, this is sex trafficking, so you can see it and you can say, these are the behaviors that we want to see. So we have to kind of do it a different way. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So we took a sample of these records and did some work with them. We took 6,000 records and we divided them into 6 sets of 1,000 records each, and then gave them to a bunch of students, a bunch of graduate students. These online ads, or what the records were from 28 different cities that represented about 570 different locations. So what happened was, did my thing just crash?
Yes, we lost your slides.
Okay, well, let's go with the PDF backup. Can you see that at all?
Yes, we see the ad categories.
Okay, perfect. Well, good thing for backups, right? So what we did was had an expert in sex trafficking look at all 6,000 of these ads, and he categorized them into large categories, into escort categories, spa, dating, recruiting. So like we're recruiting for people, camera or phone sex work, adult entertainment, reviews of websites or hotels or bars where you can meet people, and rescue ads. So some of these are perfectly fine and perfectly legal. Some of these are not. So we needed a way to kind of break things down. So we looked at all of those that we were able to categorize pretty clearly as highly one of these categories. Most of the majority of the work was in the escort section. So we set up an inter-rater study, and not 8,000, it was 6,000 records. And we had these students rate them. We assigned each batch of 100 to 2 different students, and we had them independently categorize the ad. Now, this was not fun. Our students had a lot of training beforehand. They had mental health training, and they had mental health breaks, because these ads are quite disgusting, if to be honest. Then we compared their ratings to each other, the ratings for each person to the expert, and we ran a text analytics model to categorize these to see how the computer algorithm did compared to the people. So that's what we're going to look at now. Our students you know, not awful. They were much better at doing escort ads than anything else. So we're going to see a series of these. At the bottom is one person, one student. At the side is a second student, another student. And if these blue, darker blue and lighter blue boxes line up, then they agreed. Like spa and massage ads, they had really good agreement. On other, not so much. So the agreement here was not great. So that's kind of how you look at this, this structure. So this was student to student. It wasn't the same students across all 6 sets, but it was student 1 to student 2 on those sets. So now when we started looking at how they compared to the expert, we actually kind of got pretty good results, but we're going to skip through those. So that's student 1 and 2. This is student 2 and the expert, still pretty good, not awful. And this is where we started getting to the computer, and our computer was actually doing a better job agreeing with our expert than our students were, which is fine. That's not unusual. If you want to look at it, our computer did a better job across the board, and was able to, you know, classify 75% of the records as the expert would. And that was much better than what our students did. They were, you know, closer to 40% or 60% classification. So we decided from this, we need to, if we're going to go this route, we need to train our students better, give them more breaks, and really reduce the stress on reading those, because they're quite not fun. John Schuneman is actually on this webinar. He was part of this project and can tell you that these are not fun to read. We do need to reduce category options. We think there's some confusion going on there. But we're going to move forward with text analytics because it's big data, and nobody wants to read 3 million records of human trafficking. So the next steps, what we're dealing with now is really refining that analytics, that text analytics algorithm, working it into our larger app database, and being able to bring on new data sources. So we are currently working with LSU. They are scraping new data sources. They're working on some new sites that have come up since Backpage went down. We are working on scraping Twitter data. All of that will come together in the app that we are working with law enforcement to build. And I think that may be the last slide that I have. So if anybody has any questions, I am happy to answer those.
Again, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A and we'll address those. But while we're waiting to see if others get questions typed in, Dr. McGaugh, had you done research like this before using some of this data, this open data that's just out there through these digital ads? Was this a new process for you, or had you already done some work kind of in this area?
So the data for this particular project was the online digital ads, publicly available out there for anybody to see. They're not from the dark web or anything like that. Everybody asks me, well, why don't you scrape the dark web? And I'm like, because people don't know how to get there unless you're really bad. And we're not necessarily looking for, that's not the route that the people we're looking for are going to take. We're looking for more mainstream people that are really trying to get this out for the general public. Think of it as people would used to go cruise a street to find prostitutes. Now they're cruising online ads to find them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that has a lot of anonymity to go with it. And so those people that are in the online ads aren't necessarily willing to be there, right? They didn't want to be there. And those are the ones we're trying to find.
Were there some nuances, especially as you're using students to help with this project, and all of a sudden they're on university computers and they're just, they're going to places that we don't want them, necessarily. The university is like, ugh. Were there some unique things about doing that digital research with a topic like this?
That is a great question. And yes, so before we ever even took control or took any data from LSU, we went all the way up. We went through all of the College of Business line. And got approvals. We went through legal at OSU. We went all the way up to Vice President of Research. And that was all approved. We cleared it with the FBI in Oklahoma. We cleared it with the Bureau of Narcotics, which is where the human trafficking group in Oklahoma is housed. So we made sure that OSU was protected, that our students were protected, and that everything was on the up and up. And because it's publicly available data and people just put it out there for anybody to see, there's not, a thing of privacy that goes with it, right? So we don't have that issue. Yeah. Now, the one thing that we have had a snag on is images, because we can't say that those images are for sure adults, right? I mean, many of them may not be, but because they were put on a public website that was freely available, everybody says we're still okay.
Yeah. Good. There is a question that's come in that says, do you have a strategy plan for new data sources that are harder to access? Like, kind of, you started to address those next steps. What are you thinking of from that strategy standpoint?
Yeah, so we were hoping to take our text analytics topics and themes that we were coming up with and be able to push those out to a search engine through a web scraper. So it would be like me going to Google and saying, show me all the red hats today that I want to see, right? So we were trying for that. That is actually much harder because all we can get from that is very cursory information from that search. So we're having to go into individual sites and build the scrapers to say, show me all the red hats for each one. So that's a bit of a challenge. That's why we start with very specific ones that are going to have the majority of the people on them, and we go from there.
Great. Got a couple more questions. So how does the expert in trafficking validate what he or she determines to be actual trafficking to establish ground truth data?
Yeah, that is a great question, and it's a hard one to answer. He has been working in human trafficking, sex trafficking specifically, for a while, years actually. We also pass those and have the law enforcement experts that are investigators in human trafficking categorize those as well. We're never gonna get a 100% yes, this is targeted trafficking, and no, it's not. And we actually spoke with the agent in charge, the director of the human trafficking division at the Bureau of Narcotics, to see if we can start getting some of that feedback based off of their investigations so we can improve our algorithms. But it's one of those things where it's not going to be a 100% yes, we're sure that's it.
Well, and I know too, just in some of those conversations, that the people posting the ads are getting quite clever. And I mean, just the things they're doing on their end that make it difficult to track down. I mean, it's fascinating to listen to some of that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Hiding things in emojis and emoticons, so images that mean specific things to traffickers and to people in that industry, right? Hiding things that are supposed to be numbers and not numbers, and that's really hard for computers to pick up, like I said earlier. So we're really we have to get smarter, just like they have to get smarter, you know, to try to outrun it.
Yeah, so this will be our last question so that we can move on to our next presenter. But the question you had mentioned, the categories, and I'm assuming as the question is asked, so the different categories that you had as far as, I'm assuming the types of ads, but it says, how do you determine the categories? Do you have any specific rules or procedures you follow in categorizing?
We did. We, out of the years of experience that the expert had, we developed almost like a dictionary. We can put those dictionary words through a search engine, but they're not ever going to be as good as the words that the people use, right? They're very generic. When we put them down, when we categorize them, they're much more specific. And if we are seeing the same language within an ad, within multiple ads, and it's maybe, you know, one is posted in Seattle and one is posted in Florida, then we have something going on, right? So something is definitely happening there. They're moving, they're mobile. You know, we need to look at that a little bit more. If we have 100 ads with the same language and it's all in Guyman, Oklahoma, and it's one person, we're not going to look at that quite as much. We might send it to the Guyman, Oklahoma police, but we're not going to look at it quite as much. It's most likely not a trafficker. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Thank you so much, Miriam, for sharing what you're doing. It's an exciting project, and I think really positioning OSU and the Spear School of Business kind of in this arena to be a real resource for the state. So.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you to John, who's on the call, and all the students that had to suffer through reading these very not nice ads. So this couldn't have gotten done without all of them. So.
Well, thank you for tackling a big problem. So now I'm pleased to introduce our next panelist, and that is Dr. Willie Tao, an assistant professor in hospitality and tourism management. And we're going to lighten it up a little bit, not quite so heavy, but Willie, you've been doing some interesting research in regards to kind of what we're seeing online for food service operations. So I'm going to turn that over to you now.
Thank you, Rebecca. Are you guys looking at a presentation? Can you see that all right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. First of all, thank you, CADRE, and also Rebecca, inviting me to be one of the panelists to join our discussion today. And thank you, Miriam, for the great presentation. I think my project, is not so heavy, but a little bit more lighted. I'd like to talk about how we can utilize big data in the food service context, because I'm not sure about what kind of audience I am speaking with today. So I try to pick up a few recent publications and try to showcase what are some techniques as well as research design that we can actually apply in business research. And hopefully that will generate some discussion later on, so that our colleagues at OSU or any student who's interested in the project, they might, getting some ideas from our discussion today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my background a little bit. So I'm Willie Tao, assistant professor with the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management. We are one of the newest academic units within Spears. I always tell others, food is the language I speak, and also travel is my favorite exercise. So as someone who was, grew up in Taiwan, it's a tiny island, but we are famous for technology, such as semiconductor, but also food. So it's a naturally mix for me to look into the food service management, as well as how we can utilize technology such as social media and also big data to further help our industry. So for the presentation today, I'd like to talk about just provide some operational definition what big data is in my research. Why do we care about it? And also some specific examples, how I utilize big data, and also some of my future research projects. And I welcome any comments, feedbacks, and questions after my presentation. So first of all, I kind of define with my collaborator data set that cannot be perceived, acquired, managed, and processed by using any traditional information technology within the reasonable time frame. We call that big data. And according to the literature, there are three very important characteristics about big data. We call that data velocity, which means everything collecting in real time. It's so fast. And the other part is the data volume. Later on, I will show in the following slides. What is the value that we are talking about in the contemporary world. The other one is the variety. In the last presentation, Miriam should talk about texture analysis, which I also utilize that. But beyond text, there are also photos, videos, audios that can be potentially used by researchers in the world today. So exactly how big is big? I think this is like an interesting question that many new scholars or students when they first time to learn about big data, they were asking, so how big is big? So traditionally, I mean nowadays, if you have any portable drive, it's about couple thousand gigabytes, or you have like 2 or 3 terabytes. That's pretty good. And we can look into the what does that mean? Any like video that you stream online from Netflix that can be 1 to 2 gigabytes, and your drive, external drive that can be couple terabytes. But what we're talking about today is that it's getting more and more complex in the contemporary society, and anything that can be reached exabyte, zettabyte down the road in the foreseeable years, which is stunning. And the next 2 slides, I like to show you what happened in just like 1 minute of the day in different platforms. So this is the very interesting visualization about every minute of data in a day in 2020. As we are all aware of, that's the year back in I remember March 2020. That's when the COVID-19 pandemic hits the US. And as you can see that Zoom, we have a lot of Zoom meetings, basically what we're doing right now. But in my specific area of research, you can see the increase of DoorDash orders. It's like more than 500 calls every minute. Instagram posts, we use that. The restaurant industry, lodging sectors, meetings, convention, utilize that to showcase, even put ads on Instagram, Twitter, and also how much money people spend online. That's over $1 million in just 1 minute in 2020. And what I'm going to show you next is even more stunning. As you can see, Instagram users shared more than 65,000 photos in just 1 minute in 2021. And this is the most recent data that I can share with attendees today. And Twitter users that post more than 500,000 tweets in 1 minute. And not to mention how much money that people just spending on even just one platform like Amazon, it's $283,000 in just 1 minute. So that's why data never sleeps nowadays. That's why we need to probably, in addition to the conventional research methods, qualitative or quantitative, how can we providing another angle using the public available data online and to get some insights. So with that being said, most of the times when I conduct big data research in the food service context, I utilize user-generated content. And these are the information that people freely, they voluntarily write the reviews, share their experience with others on the review websites, for example, Google Business on a Google Map, Yelp.com, TripAdvisor, even Facebook, pages, Instagram and Twitter. I think one of the advantages for that is that that reflects, consumers, their actual and also real-time perceptions, which is pretty important for business owners nowadays. And the other reason why I focus on unstructured, user-generated content is that 95% of that they are highly unstructured, but they are so big and also so accessible, to researchers. So in the following few slides, I'd like to talk about a few projects that I work with my graduate students in HTM, what we did before. So you might wonder, like, what is that, right? So these are some photos and actual Instagram, posts that we scraped from some top pastry chefs in the world. So with this project, rather than scraping anything related to pastry, we actually focus on I would say the top of the pop. They are the champions of the world competitions in pastry, and we focus on 6 elite chefs and scrape thousands of their posts and trying to identify. So what are some themes that they reveal? And how does that relate to how the knowledge about professional knowledge that is passed down to others, or maybe sharing with whoever is interested in this topic. So within this project, we utilize one research design called a nested quality research. We have a larger component for the quality analysis after we scrape down all the photos and also the posts. So we identified 5 major things. And as you can see in the box below, for the first topic, that's the creative presence, followed by creative ethics, and other are the flavor, process, and recipe disclosure. Those are more related to the actual content that we reviewed in their posts. So by using this, we also trying to compare and contrast with the extant literature and see how people talk about how this professional knowledge that was traditionally disseminated in the network, and also how they are validated by others. So by showing this graph from the qualitative side, we kind of know, what are some things that are more important than the others, and also how it's interplayed within this knowledge framework. So for this, the second follow-up part of the study, we developed a hierarchical regression model. And we also, identified that, process disclosure and also recipe disclosure, they are significantly associated with the, how many responses that the post can receive on the Instagram. The reason why we're doing that is that we want to show what's the impact, for whoever sharing information online, because those, interactions or responses like, likes, comments, share, even just putting an emoji, that's almost can be treated as a social currency, which is pretty powerful, and that determines, your position for sharing information online. So traditionally, those elite, status, of these food professionals, they gain their status, through some traditional methods. For example, that can be a competition, hosted by, the country, the government, or the state. Even, the Michelin star, that's a company, traditionally they do, tires, but actually they provided, restaurant ratings, for different countries, including the US, Europe, some other countries. But nowadays, because of social media, how many followers they have, and also the impact they can receive on those social media, also, give those, chefs elite status, showcase that they are important. They can share their knowledge through social media. In the second case, I like to talk about is about how me and my students, we utilize Twitter to conduct research, and that leads to some research related to one critical topic in corporate social responsibility, CSR. Sustainability, like going green, these are more important than ever in hospitality and tourism industries. And I show this is that I want to show, everybody can actually, if you go to these websites, you can actually, collecting some tweets using some already developed, scripts online, and you can do some basic analytics and getting a better idea, before you go further for more, in-depth design theory research, or that's it. Maybe you just want to get a big picture of the topic. You can do that, and also further design your, follow-up study. All right, the last piece, because of time, I want to talk about topic modeling. That's another very important technique that I utilize in the big data research. So basically, we are trying to, rather than having, researchers, reading through, thousands or millions of online tweets, reviews, we try to train the machine using artificial intelligence and trying to identify, so what are some important topics, and what is the percentage that they appear, in the text or in the corpus, and what is the, relationship between and among those topics. So I work on a project with some colleagues in different institutions. We look into almost like a Yelp.com, but just it's for the people who suffer from food allergies. And for the record, we have about, at least 5 million Americans suffer from food allergies. And it's important because that can be fatal if they accidentally, have something, for example, tree nuts. If they are allergic to tree nuts, if they have that, that can be fatal. So that's why it's important to know before they go out to eat, or maybe when they leave something on the website, how does that affect, a restaurant or what they like. So according to the topic modeling, we identify some important topics, and we further utilize the correlation and try to see how they are correlated with each other. And from this one, you can find, there are 5 salient groups. They are important, in terms of when people going out, people with food allergy when they go out. These are something that they will look into. So with this, preliminary analysis, we also further develop like a model and see how it affects a restaurant's rating. So as you can see here, I think the most important finding in this, model is that, group number 5, communication between the employees, communication from the company, even from the menu, or maybe the disclosure on the website, that, negatively, impact the restaurant ratings. And for the positive ones, as you can see here, for example, the experience, the food, and also, even the chef, that will bring some positive impact on the restaurant ratings that people left, on those review websites. So what does that mean, and why do we care about it? So according to, some other research, we know that even just a 1-star increase in rating for the restaurants leads to like a 5 to 9% increase in the revenue. And you cannot imagine like how many restaurants we have in the United States. So that's even just like one restaurant with an annual revenue of $1 million, that means a 1-star increase. That means, $50,000 to $90,000 more each year. And that money can be used, to hire more people. That money can be used to better, provide to their employees. So for some future research, I talk about, using social media data like Instagram, Twitter, and also, the website using web scraping. But I think nowadays, I gradually move forward to how can we get some data, for some app-based, platforms. For example, those, third-party delivery apps. So that's one project I'm looking at, and also collecting some information, for example, from Reddit, so that I can get a better idea of that. And the other one is the social aspect of the technology. For example, we're going to have a service robot at Taylor's. So in the next few weeks, maybe after spring break, if you see me and my students, collecting some data at Taylor's, which is a student-led restaurant in the Nancy Randolph Davis building, don't be surprised because we are working on some research. So given the time I have, I don't want to go further, and delay everybody's schedule. But here's my email address, and if you scan a QR code, that links to my Instagram page. And I welcome any questions and also comments from the audience. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Will. Just so fascinating. And again, if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the Q&A, and we'll be sure to get them and address them before we end. I have a question for you. In working with graduate students and talking about some of the work, are you finding that students, that your research students are kind of equipped to know how to do some of this digital research? Are you having to spend more time on the front end to help introduce them to some of these techniques that perhaps they've not ever done this kind of research before?
Yeah, I mean, from the faculty standpoint, we would assume, students nowadays, they are digital native. They are great, in technology, but the reality is that they know how to use that, but in terms of research, we still need to provide a little bit more guidance. So at the beginning, there's some, learning curve. We need to help them to overcome those barriers. But I think the biggest challenge is actually not in the, the techniques. We can work with different colleagues in, MSIS, with, different departments, and we can overcome that. But I think always the issue is that how do we combine the research method, which is big data, with the the concept or like a very focused area. For example, I have students, they are interested in corporate social responsibility. I have students who focus more on consumer behaviors. So with all these different concepts and ideas, how can big data help? And make it like a rigorous research. I think that's more challenging and takes a little bit more time to guide them and help them, to get started. And I think once we encourage them, they have great experience in the first project, and the second one and third one will come. That's based on my, so far my experience working with students who are new to big data research.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so really kind of early on the front end, helping with that text mining, that data mining, giving them those skills early on, because it's kind of moving that way. Great. Well, thank you so much. And I know we'll have some more general discussions about doing digital research. So again, thank you for your time. Really fascinating stuff. And I'm sure just in demand by the hospitality industry because it's changing. I mean, it's real-time data for them. They get customer complaints while it's happening. It's not waiting for that comment card to come in at the end of the meal or a week after. They're tweeting it out. They're putting a Yelp review right then. And
yeah, if I may share something, before we move forward, is that nowadays when you go to restaurants, you'll see everybody like grabbing their cell phone, texting, even like parents eating with their children, 4 people, everybody's like using their cell phone. So it's like real-time data. So even in the hospitality industry or tourism sectors, I mean, we go beyond operations. We hire a lot of, MSI students, like finance students, accounting students. So there's a whole lot, a big world for us to explore. Yeah. But we'll talk a little bit more later. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, our final panelist is Dr. Duygu Phillips, who is a postdoctoral fellow with us here at the School of Entrepreneurship. And they've been doing some interesting work looking at entrepreneurs and kind of in the area of that social media. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Duygu, as you talk about working with new ventures.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. Thank you all for organizing this, and it's been really great. So I'm here to present what we do with the digital data in entrepreneurship research. I've been a postdoctoral researcher in entrepreneurship at OSU, and I earned my doctoral degree in entrepreneurship from OSU as well. And since the very first year of my PhD program, I started working on digital data and trying to understand, trying to ask questions and answer the questions about new ventures, social media legitimacy. I've been working with my advisor, Dr. Rutherford, on this topic, and we've been looking at several platforms, several contexts, and trying to understand how new ventures acquire legitimacy in the social media and also all the digital platforms. It's been very valuable for us, the social media, the digital data context, because for new ventures, our question is, how do they acquire legitimacy? Legitimacy means how stakeholders, how different employees and customers and investors, suppliers, all these different types of stakeholders, how do they find a firm to be appropriate, to be acceptable, to be proper and desirable? So for new ventures, since they lack a lot of resources, they don't have the historical proofs and credibility, they really need to develop their identity and communicate it to their stakeholders in order to convince them that they are legitimate, that they are the proper entities so they can be trusted. And so one, legitimacy for firms is also important, but for new ventures, it is even more important since they suffer from this liability of newness, being very new to the marketplace and a lack of awareness for stakeholders. So while we are doing this research, one main research question that we ask is how new ventures gain, maintain, and also lose their legitimacy through their identity claims and through narratives and through rhetoric. So we look at how they develop their identity and how they communicate it. And one platform that they can really do it easily, and if they do it effectively, that they can benefit a lot, is digital platforms, because they're much more accessible. There is, as Dr. Teo mentioned, there's real-time connection, interaction with the stakeholders. The information diffuses really fast on social media too, so it has disadvantages as much as disadvantages. But if new ventures can use these platforms effectively, then they can really create their organizational identity and communicate it and acquire legitimacy in that social media or the digital environment, which can subsequently help them grow their legitimacy perceptions in the minds of their stakeholders. In turn, at the end, this legitimacy helps them improve their performance. So we've been doing several different types of research using different methodologies like interviews, surveys, experiments, but we've been often using digital platforms and digital data to answer these specific questions in those different contexts. So I want to show what kind of data we are collecting, and I want to show how we are using this data. So we use company websites. We collect data from company websites, their about us pages, our team member pages, their vision and mission statements, and we do a lot of text analysis as well. We also collect data from social media platforms, the Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and also we attempted to collect data from Facebook, but that was the very first time that I started working on this, and it was 2017. So we had a computer science master's student write us a code, and by the time it was ready, Facebook implemented all these serious restrictions on data collection based, after those scandals. So we were unable to do that. So we moved to Twitter, and Twitter has been much more user-friendly, and they've been actually giving more access to data. So we collect the data from those different platforms, social media platforms, but also we look at cryptocurrency, we look at crowdfunding, and I'm also interested in NFTs, non-fungible tokens. So if you have any ideas, any suggestions, I would love to hear. We collect data about new ventures, crowdfunding campaigns that entrepreneurs run, cryptocurrency. So those are the data sources that we use. And I'll talk about a little bit about our different projects where we use these different types of data. But before that, I want to show how we conduct this analysis and what is our analytical process. First of all, after we collect, we have the idea of what kind of data we need to collect, and we have our research model, of course. So we look at different dictionaries. There are so many existing different dictionaries for different constructs of interest in the entrepreneurship research too. And I use different softwares to analyze the data. One of them is Look, and the other one is Diction. These softwares also have their own built-in dictionaries that are already validated. They provide different dictionaries to analyze, to measure different constructs like emotions, positive emotions, negative emotions, anger, sadness, family, social, rewards, and so many others. So they're pretty good, but then based on our research question, when we cannot find the right dictionary, then we go on and build our own dictionary. So I have built one dictionary to analyze, to measure the humility, the personality of humility of entrepreneurs, and another one that Dr. Rutherford and I created a dictionary for legitimating language, different types of language that communicate legitimacy, pragmatic, moral, and cognitive, and we use those in our papers. To build our own dictionary, as you may know, is very challenging. It's a very demanding process, very detailed process, especially the validation of those dictionaries. So we follow, but there are great resources that we follow. We follow some great papers that I list here, and I can share. If anybody is interested, I can share these citations later on too. There's a paper of Short et al. 2010 about construct validation, and they list all the steps to develop a dictionary. Another one to validate the dictionaries that we use a lot is McKinney et al.'s article. So there are plenty of great resources, but it does require a lot of time, and it's a very detailed process. After we have our dictionary, then we select our samples. Sometimes we collect data from the websites, sometimes from social media platforms, as I mentioned. A lot of time we get help to write a code, to get a code, usually to use it on that is developed on Python. We get a lot of help from students in the graduate students in the computer science department, as well as the business analytics department. So I really appreciate their help. And then we collect the data and we clean the data. And as you know, since it's big data, there's a lot of cleaning to do. And finally, we analyze, and we usually use multi-level modeling or growth modeling. So this is the analytical process that we follow usually in our research, where we use the big data, where we use the digital data. And I want to present a few of our papers that are, most of them are under progress, but where we use the digital data, how we use it, and what kind of insights we gained or we expect to gain. One of them is the data that we collected from Twitter, and we try to see how new ventures communicate with their stakeholders to achieve social media legitimacy. And we look at specific type of languages. One of them is emotional language, and the other one is legitimizing language. And as I mentioned, we use our own dictionary for the legitimizing language, and there are 3 different types. And we also look at emotional language. Does that help for new ventures to acquire legitimacy? And what we find that the tweets that communicate pragmatic and moral legitimacy help new ventures gain legitimacy in the social media, but emotions do not. They actually may harm legitimacy. That's what we found. Another project that we have been working on is analyzing the role of psychological capital of entrepreneurs during the pandemic, during the COVID-19 pandemic. So what our preliminary findings show us that overly optimistic entrepreneurs may actually harm their social media performance and subsequently their new venture performance. Another paper that we're working on is to see how the new venture founders' level of narcissism affects their decisions, and specifically their decisions about the new venture name. We are asking to see whether highly narcissistic founders will be more inclined to choose a family name, a name after their family for their firms. And our preliminary findings show that new venture founders with high level of narcissism name their businesses after their family firms. And to do this, we collect some data from LinkedIn, so the LinkedIn accounts of the founders, to be able to analyze their narcissism from the profile texts. Another project we've been working on is about private firms and that have exited, that have been acquired by other larger firms. So we collected data from their About Us pages, and we tried to measure their degree of femininess, and we wanted to see if their degree of femininess that were communicated in their About Us pages affected the exit success. But since these firms were already acquired, we needed to go back in time and use the Wayback Machine and get to their About Us pages and collect data. That was a manual process that took a bit of time, but we got great help from our GAs too, so I really appreciate that. And what we found so far, that private firms who communicate their familiness, whether they are family firms or not, but like they act like family firm or they use familiness language, they have better exit results. So that's another project that we've used digital data, this time from company websites. And finally, last area of our research focuses on or uses data from digital platforms. One of them is crowdfunding. So we collect data from Kickstarter, and we look at how entrepreneurs communicate different diffusion of innovation elements, including like the relative advantage of their products or services that they're promoting and they're trying to get investment for, how they use those diffusion of innovations elements to raise more money for their business ideas and campaigns. And for that, we collected a longitudinal data set. So we started from the launch date of the new venture, from the very first day, the campaign, launch date of the campaign from the very first day to the last day. So we're planning to conduct a growth modeling to see how those elements, different communication of those different elements affects the growth of those campaigns. Also, another paper that we've been working on is how cryptocurrency firms, cryptocurrencies white papers, the founding white papers affects their legitimacy and performance. So for that, we have been collecting longitudinal data set, again, from data from coinmarketcap.com. They provide APIs too. So we're collecting longitudinal data from that and then also collecting their white papers online, and we'll be analyzing those to see how they affect their legitimacy and performance. So these are some of the projects that we use digital data in our research in entrepreneurship, and mainly focusing on how new ventures can achieve legitimacy and improve their subsequent performance through the new venture legitimacy, specifically on social media, but in also other platforms. And we believe that this digital data will provide more and more opportunities for us as researchers. And also our goal is really to help entrepreneurs, guide them making their decisions about developing their identities and how to communicate in the social media and in the digital platforms. I think that's all I have, and thank you, and looking forward for questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Duygu. Really fascinating. I think of entrepreneurs and business startups, of how this whole digital world has really changed the world of entrepreneurship, as from crowdfunding, like that you didn't have that. You know, you used to have to go beg the banks, and now people just go online, and these digital platforms are helping fund their business. And so, and then how they market, you know, and get that word of mouth out there so quickly with these social media sites. So I know that the digital world is changing how we start up businesses. And so therefore you as a researcher, it really has to change and influence what and how you're researching as well. Thank you for those articles about building out that dictionary. I thought it was interesting when you showed the steps of kind of what dictionaries are available, having to build your own. And you had those steps listed. Would you say you spend more time on that step 1 and 2 than you do even, you know, picking which platforms and writing the code to do it? I mean, do you spend more time on that front end?
Yes, yeah, if you need to develop a dictionary, that takes a lot of time and a lot of due diligence too. The validation of the dictionaries is very important too. Yes, I would say that if I have to develop a dictionary, that will be the part that I have to spend the most time. But there are lots of dictionaries that are available, already validated. So when you find that's much easier. Yeah. And if anybody is interested, I can send those articles or, you know, the citations and the links.
That would be great. I think we can follow it up with those that registered. I think that would be really helpful for folks that are exploring this world. Some folks had some questions. How do you define familyness? That's kind of a new term for some fields, maybe outside of business. How would you describe family or define familyness?
Yeah, so in the dictionary, you know, there are any word that are related to family are included in those dictionaries. So social interactions and some family related words. I don't know it up from the top of my head right now, but I can share that. I actually have a PDF where I have all the, that one is the familyness dimension, comes from dictionary comes from the Look software, and I have a PDF of all those words. I can share that with you later. If you leave, I can't see the chat box now, but here, if you leave your email, I can share that with you.
Okay, Great. And with regard to on your the research in regards that you showed with Instagram, you talked about overly optimistic entrepreneurs being detrimental. Does that mean, is it detrimental to the overall business venture? Is that specific to product, promotion, profits? Like what, just can you talk, just kind of expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so in that one, we're looking at psychological capital, and psychological capital has 5 dimensions. One of them is optimism, resilience. And so here we are looking at how new ventures communicate, with their stakeholders during a difficult time like COVID, and especially we look at before and after the shutdowns. And what we've in the preliminary find, we're still working on this project, but we're finding that if the entrepreneurs are talking in an overly optimistic tone, too positive, and ignoring maybe all the problems that are going around, then their social media performance gets harmed, and so we see less likes. And eventually we also have the performance outcome in the data set, and we are seeing some negative effects on the overall performance as well.
Yeah, great.
These are some preliminary findings, so we're still working on.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating just to think about that? Someone else had commented, just thank you for the great presentation. And as a new faculty member interested in digital humanities research, they're struggling to identify funding sources. Do any of you all, we'll kind of move into just some general discussion from all of you. Do any of the panelists have tips for grant seeking in specifically digital humanities, or just the social sciences part of it? Any thoughts on that as we move into this general discussion?
It's difficult. So I will say that probably one of the hardest parts we've had is trying to find funding for just human trafficking, period. But it's the research component isn't where people want to fund. They want to fund prevention, or even though that's what we're trying to do, or intervention. So you have to get real creative, I think. And we've looked to some internal sources for funding. We have looked at OSU grants. We have looked at funding from donors and alumni, corporate funding, but it's at this point in time, it's really hard to find something that doesn't have a very specific outcome that you're trying to achieve. Yeah. And people don't want to do funding for sex trafficking because it's not going to affect their businesses, although it will, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, because it is to the participants' question, it's about, the research is often low cost, but it's just that funding students and, manuscript fees and trying to get to conferences and the university overhead costs, those types of things. So Duygu, if you don't mind, Duygu, maybe stop sharing your screen. Everybody can see all the panelists there. And go ahead, Willie. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no problem. I just want to share some my experience, trying to get some funding for the research to get going. So I'll share some successful ones, but also, the failures. I think that's also very important. So successful ones. Me and also my colleague before COVID, we got a contract from the city of Stillwater looking into their tourism data. Our strategy is that, rather than having just one person, we form a team and we utilize different, techniques or research methods to triangulate our findings. So that's one way to, get some funding so that we can hire some, graduate research assistants, and also, for data collection, even compensate, from expenses for research. The other strategy is looking to some, startup funding, seed funds within universities. I didn't try it at OSU, but one of my collaborator, he tried at his institute. Then he got, $20,000 or something, for a project. And again, it's a cross, disciplinary research, and also it's cross, university. So I think that kind of, bring up a more diverse perspective, a little bit more attractive to the grantor. The other failure I tried, but I think, we can keep trying. National Science Foundation, under that, there's a, social science components. I tried to submit like a rapid grant, within COVID, but that one didn't get funded. But I think once we get some more preliminary data, for the service robot, we might try again. But always reach out to some senior colleagues. I think most of the grant managers, state level, federal level, they are super responsive, in terms of, even just responding to like a one-page concept paper. They will let you know what are things that they can do or they'd like to do in the future. Then, establish the connection and relationship. I think later on, that might help, even with big data research, we might be able to get some funding for that.
Yeah, and I think your point about that co-collaboration, cross-disciplinary, those are becoming more and more attractive to those granting institutions. So good. I want to be mindful of everybody's time, but a couple of things. So what have been some of your biggest challenges when using data from some of these open sources? I mean, you've touched on a few. Were there any other challenges that you've come across using some of these open sources?
For me, the restrictions and changes, there's a constant change on websites, on different social media platforms like Twitter. My biggest struggle was the very beginning with Facebook, but Twitter is very good. They're actually increasing, especially with increasing access, especially with the academic account. If you get an academic account now, and pretty easy to get one, if you just apply for it and explain what you're going to be doing, and then you get unlimited access to data, like 10 million tweets per month, which is a lot. So that's great, but still things change very quickly. So once you have the code written, you may not be able to use it for a very long time. So I suggest, for those who want to do this kind of research, I suggest to have at least a little bit of knowledge about Python, and because you will need to modify the codes some throughout. And yeah, that has been my biggest challenge, that it's never staying still, moving very fast.
I would agree with that. Since we're out there scraping 20 some odd different websites on a regular basis and collecting information every day, it is a challenge when none of them have the same standards. So some use JavaScript, some use HTML, some use something that we have completely no idea what it is. You have to build your programs for each one of those, and that is extremely time consuming. So, we may have one student working on one site for an entire summer, and 6 months later, it completely changes because they've updated their website. And it's just very frustrating. The other thing I would say that is a challenge when it comes to big data is just housing it and processing it is always, we're always trying to figure out where can we put this, that it's gonna fit, and do we need to keep it in-house? Can we send it off to a cloud somewhere? And then how is the best way to process it? John on the call is actually one that processed a large chunk of our big data and ended up using one of the supercomputers he had access to. And it's just some of the challenges, storage, collection, processing it. So you can't get impatient. It takes a while to get through some of those.
Along that line of processing the data, what are some tools that you use to clean data? And I'll throw that out to anybody that wants to jump on in there.
Everything. I feel like the kitchen sink when we're pulling it all. Python, SAS, R, I don't even know what all some of our students use on it. But it's the kitchen sink. It's kind of like, I feel like I need a law degree to read the criteria for being able to scrape the data, and then I need this over here to, it's a lot. It's fun though. It's fun.
I mean, I really enjoy, joining this panel discussion because I can see all the panelists are smiling when we are, hearing the responses and also the questions. But I totally agree with the other two, panelists about their responses to the questions. I think, Miriam just bring up another issue is the legality, research ethics and also the legal issues. I mean, most of the time it's fine as long as it's public available data, everybody have access online, then it should be okay. But still, I still go through, since I was a graduate student, every time, even big data project using second data, still go through the IRB applications. And if you're working with, for example, the allergy website, that's on a nonprofit organization in Boston. So we actually contacted, the NGO, talked to the owner, talked to the manager, and we signed a memorandum so that we ensure, we have the right to use their data. And also when the project is done, published, we were able to, even write an executive summary so that they can reference some research. I think these are some, practical considerations and how, we as researchers, we can give back to the community and also actually making the, social impact or, impact on the, small businesses. I think these are some other, things that we can ponder.
Yeah. Oh, we could go on with this conversation. It's been so good. I have like 6 more questions on my paper that we didn't get to today, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time on the call today. So thank you to our panelists. Big round of applause. It's wildly loud. You just can't hear it. But just thank you for so informative and interesting to see the wide variety of where we're trying to impact businesses and that social good, as Willie kind of ended on there. So thank you for that. And we'd like to say thank you to CADRE for having a Spear School of Business participate and share what we're doing. And we're excited to be a part of this campus-wide conversation, and just encourage you all to continue it and be a part of that conversation. And if others on the call sometime or on the webinar want to present, reach out to Kay. I know she's always looking for opportunities. So again, thank you for having us, and thank you to all of our panelists. And Kay, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Yes, this was awesome. I think it was a fascinating array of topics, and you all just really did a great job of presenting. So with that, yes, a couple of, I see an email address and some links in the chat, so please follow up with those if you're interested. And we will hope to see you at the next CADRE event.